Welcome to the Jeremy Mullins podcast, where we take a deep dive into different educational topics to help you optimize your life. I'm Jeremy. I am your host. I am here with my co-host, Mr. Reno.
What's going on?
And I don't know if you may have heard that.
And
our co-host, Boots, who just grunted at us. So she's probably, she's like, do I have to just sit here and be good? I want to chase something. I want to bite something.
Yeah.
But she's just kind of hanging out in the floor while we're talking. So, well, I'm not going to go so much into, even though it's still, because we filmed an episode before this, we're filming a second episode. I think I geeked out and was pretty blown away by the facility on the last podcast, but I'm not going to say much about it this time other than we are still in the podcast studio.
That's right.
Which is kind of cool, right? You change lighting's the same.
Lighting's the same, which,
Okay.
I mean, I can mess around with it.
Well, no, we'll say we're gonna do a few today, so we'll go different color lighting for the next one. But it's nice, man. I'm still just kind of at awe that people are listening to a kid that grew up in Appalachia coal mines that struggled with his weight, and it's kind of the reason I went into fitness to begin with. And like, it's just cool to see 25 years later that, I guess you're Appalachia too, two kids from Appalachia are educating people, and it's kind of cool.
It's weird that the power of podcasts and the power of storytelling is so needed, and it shows with everything, but also when you're like living it, it like is a little bit more surreal.
Yeah. We were talking about this earlier, and I think it's true looking at, the political landscape, right? And I don't care. Once again, guys, you'll say like I never get into politics, because I just don't think it's one of those things. Like I always say, people are emotionally attached to nutrition, religion, and politics. Well, you'll never really hear us, talk about religion, and if we do, it's like, hey, you can believe in something that higher than yourself,
Yep.
right? Like because we've learned that in the H2F, capacity, and for some people that could be the Lord, so some people that could be something else.
Right.
Cool. Roger that. So don't care your political stand. Like I care if you're a good person. That's what I care.
Yep.
But it was neat to see both of the candidates going on podcasts.
Yep.
To get information out and to talk to people versus in the past more like newspapers, media, that type of stuff.
Yeah, and they were trouncing normal media. It was like hundreds of thousands of views on normal media to tens of millions on podcasts.
Yeah, and take away like the difference between the candidates and which podcast they went on.
Right.
But both of them had more views on podcasts than anything else.
Yeah, substantially. Like
Yep.
It wasn't even a close measure.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I think a couple things for that. I think in this podcast world, like, especially for you and I being on ours, mainly as people get to know us, right? Mm-hmm. And then when we meet people in person, one of the best compliments I can get is like, man, you're the same person in person that you are on the podcast or you are on your social media. Mm-hmm. And that's when you're going back to the power of storytelling. I think that's where it's at, because nowadays people are telling a story, unfortunately, but that story to a degree is not true, fake.
Yeah. It's no longer it's fiction.
Yeah. It's
tiptoeing the line.
It is a true story, right? Like It is not, just telling, what it is. Like it unfortunately is, telling a story that's not necessarily true.
Right.
And we see that a lot in the fitness industry with people photoshopping their photos and that type of stuff. So, thank you, I guess is where I'm going with that rabbit hole, right? Thank you for guys that are listening, the listeners that listen to the podcast, that share it with individuals, that go on and leave reviews. Like, we appreciate that. And, mentioned this before as we're rolling here in the new studio is, we're going to look to do a podcast every day, throughout the week. So 5 a week in 2025, bring a little bit more of the educational podcast back in, a lot more with some of the guests, especially people I've worked with over the last 15, 20 years that have had success. Mm-hmm. And I wrote that down in my notes on the last podcast. I'm going to start reaching out to some of these individuals that maybe are not in the app with me, but I know have like maintained their weight and, just living a healthy life, and get them on the podcast.
Yeah.
Right. And these might be somebody I haven't talked to in a decade,
And I think those are powerful too, just because They didn't have to stick within that ecosystem to, yeah.
And these are not two people that are in the app. Like they're individuals that had come to my CrossFit facilities in the past, but they're not necessarily in the app.
Mhm.
So it's just kind of cool to see. So we are wanting to bring on a lot more guests in the future. So
Yeah, and that's like a lot of the requests is they love how short they are, and they love that the guests come on and they give their real world experience. Yeah, it's pretty
now
simple.
today we want to talk about why it's important to be strong and to be cardiovascular fit, or AKA have a high VO2 max and a lot of muscle tissue.
Right.
Okay. And when I say this, I do not want people to be like, well, what number should I be? Because I think that is a lot of times people, over when we hear stuff and we say, hey, I want to increase your VO2 max. I don't need you to go out and find, for example, like DexaFit and go have a VO2 max test done. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is cardiovascular fitness is very important for long-term health. Okay. I don't need you to go out and become a state holder in a strength measurement, right? You don't need to be a state powerlifter, quote, record breaker.
Right.
But I need you to focus on strength. I need you to become stronger. I need you to have muscle tissue, because the more muscle tissue you have and the more strength you have as you age, the longer you live.
Yeah, especially as you age, the more minuscule injuries you recover a lot faster.
100% faster, right? And this is when I do lectures in person, I draw this line on the board, and Coach Greg Glassman, who invented, I hate to use started CrossFit, right? Because CrossFit was not invented. Like, there was functional movements that were already being done.
He brought cameras to film.
I mean, people were already doing Olympic lifts. People were already doing power lifts. People were already doing gymnastics, right? But he brought it together, right? Yep. So we can say he's, the grandfather of CrossFit methodology. He had what is fitness, and if anyone's ever done their level 1 and they've studied the CrossFit methodology, it's like a bell-shaped curve, right? And if we looked at what is fitness, okay, and you take a bell-shaped curve, and I know if you're watching on YouTube, you can see me drawing, but not necessarily drawing on a board. Maybe that's what we need. We need a whiteboard, reckon. Yeah. So you look at a bell-shaped curve, right? So on this side of the bell-shaped curve, on this end, you have sickness. So you can think of someone who, doesn't have a lot of muscle tissue, can't walk up the steps, or can't even walk on level ground without breathing heavy. They maybe have metabolic condition, maybe they have high blood pressure, whatever the case is, right? Sickness. And then as you go to the top of the bell-shaped curve, up here is wellness. Wellness is you have a normal blood pressure, normal body fat, right? So you're not classified as having any diseases, but it's not like you're getting an A in class.
Right.
And then as you progress all the way over here, we have fitness. And generally people who are fit, higher VO2s, stronger, more muscle tissue, they have lower blood pressures. They have lower hemoglobin A1Cs, right? They have higher bone density. So there's all these improvements that kind of come as you tip over the bell-shaped curve from wellness to fitness. Okay. And I use this analogy, and I think this is the first time I brought it up on the podcast. Like I felt this is what happened to my father and how he passed away. Right. So everybody, and it's funny because, if I go back to Southern West Virginia, everybody's like, man, we can't believe that, your dad, he didn't have any sickness, and he just, he suddenly passed away. Like, nobody could believe that, because my dad was always active. He was hunting, he was doing stuff every single day, right? He'd even started in the past 6 months before his death, walking probably 3 or 4 days a week. So exercising on purpose, which a lot of people in Southern, West Virginia, or even in Southeast Kentucky, like, they are active in their daily life because of how they live, farming, outdoors, but like structured exercise, especially for 60-plus-year-olds, just wasn't what they did. Right. And, I looked at it from the other spectrum. His dad, unfortunately, smoked for 40 or 50 years, right? He worked in the coal mines. He was broken down a little bit. So, like, I did not look at my dad as a specimen of wellness or fitness. I would have put him, if we talked about this bell-shaped curve, I would put him a little bit to the left. He wasn't over here in sickness, but he was not well.
Right.
Okay. And what that meant was, like, anything could happen to my father, and he didn't have a buffer between where he was at on the bell-shaped curve and, unfortunately, death. He got sick, went into the doctor's office being, quote unquote, that age and a man. He didn't want to wait in line, thought he'd be okay. And I think what happened was he got sick. The sickness caused his blood pressure to go up, had uncontrolled blood pressure for X amount of days. And then unfortunately that caused a cardiovascular event because he didn't have a buffer in his life on this bell-shaped curve. So that is when I talk to people, it's like, hey, it's my goal. Now at 44 years old, I don't look and say, okay, we got to have a 600-pound deadlift. We got to have abs. We got to look cool. I mean, that stuff's all right.
Yep.
It can be a goal. That's fine. But it's really about how do I get people to increase their VO2 max, increase their strength and their muscle tissue so they live a longer, healthier, optimal life. Sorry, I didn't mean to bring it down. And
no, it's just,
you kind of looking at me and I feel comfortable. Like it's a listener, like we all lose people, right? It hurt. Don't get me wrong. I made a lot of changes when my dad passed away that I wanted to be a better person. We primarily moved states because of that, because I wanted to spend more time with my family versus what I was doing then. I made a lot of changes, but one thing that I did say is like, I will remember the memories that we made. I will not make it hurt me and my family in worrying about how it happened or why it happened.
Here's what's like, it kind of like hurts me to think about this just because of you see that generation who definitely does it. Like I see my father-in-law is in that same boat, like farmer. He moves because he works outside.
Yeah. My
dad moved a lot just because he's in that generation, 60 to 70 years old. Scary thing is I think the next generation is worse. Or maybe not. Maybe it skips a generation.
No. And you think it's worse because they saw what the generation before did, but those next generation of guys, 35 to 55 right now, they're not working like their fathers did.
No, it's desk jobs. It's
yes.
Whatever. Like fitness is huge. You see it on YouTube, you see it on social media, but it's not. It's just because there's a camera in their face. It's not big in the sense of volume.
Yes.
So that's what scares the hell out of me when I see that happen. And my dad has gone through cancer, and I see all these things. You're going to start seeing. That was at 60. My dad's 70. Or I don't know how old your father was, but like probably in the 60s.
Yep.
We're going to start seeing. We're already seeing it. 50s, 40s.
Yes.
You're seeing kids.
I mean, once again, I've said this before. No longer we can call it adult onset diabetes because our fifth graders are getting type 2 diabetes.
Yeah.
And shame on you as adults.
Yeah.
You don't see fifth graders going and buying their own groceries. And the takeaway with this is this should be the basis of why you want to be healthy, right? And once again, going to my handy dandy notes.
That's right.
Waiting for that iPad to come over,
That's a 200 BC iPad. Right there.
Exactly. Yeah. Going from 0 weekly minutes of working out to just 90 minutes a week, right? Just 90 minutes a week. And remember, we push 60 minutes of walking on purpose every single day. That would be classified as working out, but we classify it as just daily movement because we know a lot of people can double dip and get this in their lifestyle, right? But 90 minutes a week can reduce the risk of dying of all causes by 14%. Now, once again, guys, my dad was walking, things happen, bad things happen to good people. So I'm not saying that exercising and nutrition will prevent you from any cause of mortality or whatever. But what we're saying is you should exercise and you should eat right because you're going to live a healthier, happier, more optimal life.
Yep.
And then we also got there's also studies that show that, people who exercise live 10 years longer than those that don't. So on average, the people who are exercising, they're moving, they're living a decade longer than those that don't. And that's the power of movement. That's the power of exercise, the power of build that buffer, get fit so that when something happens, sickness, illness, accident, you've got enough strength, enough cardio buffer that you're still well on the bell-shaped curve.
Yep.
And we could use that short term, right? There's nothing special about the sense of me and being athletic. There's not. It's just that for the last 20 years, I've worked out consistently. So, we take it and use me, for example, okay? Tear a bicep tendon. All right, cool. Repair it, surgery repair it. Able to do the half Ironman, 9 weeks later, whatever it was,
Yeah.
right? Just got cleared at the 1st of November, was able to bench press 320, do 10 bar muscle ups.
Yeah.
And everybody's like, how are you doing that? You just had surgery. Well, before surgery, I could probably bench press 360, right?
Yeah.
And or do more bar muscle ups. So I lost some fitness, but it wasn't I had a buffer built in on fitness and wellness that, yes, I lost some fitness, but it wasn't like it went completely away.
Yeah. Which is where, I mean, we can speak on the recovery products that you used, or we already have, so we don't have to go into that. But like, that was awesome. That helped.
Yes.
That was, your 40%, your 30% on the back end that helped you speed it up.
Yes.
Because you went in healthy, or you went into the injury healthy, well.
Right.
If other people were like that.
Being in the space, right, and putting my health as a priority, as a leader in the space, right? Yes, like using some of the peptides from Summit, using the recovery cream from Costa Medica, like, yes, those things allow me to recover faster. But let's say I didn't have those, right? My point to being is like, even if I wasn't as strong as I wasn't, and it only went down a little bit, the average person can't bench press 200 pounds or whatever those numbers are.
Right.
If you are inactive because of an injury, an accident, a fall, and you already don't have a baseline of fitness, then you get even more detrained. And think about that if that happens for a 65-year-old. And we see it in the numbers. 90-some% of individuals who fall, 65 years or older, you have a fall and you break your femur, you're dying. They don't recover.
Right.
They don't recover. And I remember talking to Katie about this when she worked in the heart replacement floor. And I'm like, was there an indicator that someone would recover well and have positive outcomes after a heart surgery or a heart replacement versus others? And she's like, Jeremy, if they were able to get up and move the day after surgery, because they get them up and have them move, or maybe I don't be the day of surgery. Don't quote me on that. Day they got to her floor. Right. And she's like, because if they got up and move and they could walk or move around, they recovered. They had better outcomes. Well, what if someone doesn't have the strength to get up and move? Because they literally don't have the muscle tissue or the strength, and you just had a major surgery. So then you lay there because you don't have the strength. It's just going to go downhill. So building strength matters. Building cardiovascular matters. And I got one more thing here. I thought was pretty neat. The more aerobic fit you are, the more energy you'll have to do whatever you love to do. Right? So like, even if you don't enjoy cardiovascular activities, doing it is still going to provide you with positivity in your life, no matter what it is.
Yeah. And the good thing with like the running stuff, it's like, there's not you don't have to go run for an hour every day.
No.
It's just like 30, 60s, 60, 120s.
Yes.
For 10 minutes.
And the data, and don't forget this, guys, if you're detrained and you walking is great cardiovascular fitness if you're detrained. Mm-hmm. You'll increase your VO2 max by just walking. Yep. And when I say increase your VO2 max, that's where in the beginning, I don't need you to go get it. What it was showing in the studies we're looking at, okay, when people were in their 60s and their 70s, if they still had a VO2 max of in the 30s, well, 30s is relatively low. Like right now, if me and you had a 30, be like, dude, you need to step up your cardio, right? But the key is like, it's not that you have to have these sub-maximal levels when you get into your 60s and your 70s. It's just that they're not bottomed out like VO2 max of 15, right? But if you only are in the 30s when you're 40 years old, it's not going to automatically go up. It's going to decrease. Same thing for muscle tissue. If you're not carrying muscle tissue already in your 50s, it's going to decrease. So focusing on why you should train is more than just fat loss. It's more than just aesthetics. It's more than just look. It is to provide yourself, your family, our society with the best that you can be and live an optimal, healthy life as long as possible.
Yep. And I love everything. Either the people we partner with, the podcast, the way I've changed my lifestyle is like, I want to be optimal. I want to be normal. I don't have to be on one extreme. I don't need abs, could care less. I just love being able to do what I need to do on a daily basis and a little bit more.
Yep. And I'll just wrap it up with this. Guys, we're going to do some education on some specific, like, okay, Jeremy, you got the VO2. How do I increase my VO2? Cool. We'll do that. We'll do some podcasts on it, like you were mentioning. Some of the best way to increase your VO2 max is I like to do the 6120s, or even go up to where you're doing 4 minutes hard, 4 minutes easy, because that's going to, it's very hard to hold a high intensity cardiovascular event, and think cardiovascular, think monostructural movement. So a bike, a row, or swimming, jumping rope, that type of stuff. Like if you go over 5 minutes, you can't really hold a high intensity. You got to pace it. Yeah. So up to 4 minutes is generally where you want your intervals to be. But we'll do a whole educational podcast on, hey, how to increase VO2 max. Muscle tissue resistance training. I think we've done good with the podcast of talking about optimizing protein intake, optimizing sleep, optimizing your resistance training to increase your muscle tissue. So, hey, this one was a little bit quote dark, ladies and gentlemen, but hopefully, by sharing some things that impacted me and some storytelling of my my father and how I thought about it from the perspective of health, I hope that helps someone out there make the change in the sense of like, okay, fitness matters. I should pay attention to my VO2 max. I should pay attention to my muscle tissue, my strength, just like I do my cholesterol, just like I do my triglycerides, just like I do my hormone levels. It matters, and it matters to you, and it really matters to our society.
Yep.
So appreciate you guys and gals. If you haven't shared the podcast, please do so. Share it with a friend, share it with a neighbor. I can do one on fitness and have people do 1,000 burpees, for time. If you want to share it with someone you don't like.
I'll be sharing it.
Appreciate you guys and hope you have a wonderful day.
See you.